Hey knit friends, Romy Hill here, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about my favorite short row methods. So if I had to choose an all-time favorite short row method in the absolute world, it would be the German short rows, and I think they are absolutely completely magical. But I also have a real fondness for the Sunday short row. And I'm going to show you a modified version of the Sunday short row where I'm going to use a locking stitch marker or a safety pin instead of the waste yarn that Carol Sunday uses. So really funny kind of story about how I ended up really loving this method. When I first learned how to do the Japanese short row, I misunderstood it, and instead of slipping the first stitch of the Japanese short row, I would just worked. I would turn it, I would place my pin, and then I would just keep working. And I loved the way that it looked. So I used that a long time before I realized that in a Japanese short row, you do actually slip a stitch. In the Sunday short row, you do not slip a stitch. And this will all become more apparent to you as I show you the modified Sunday short row. So I am going to share my hands with you, and we're going to do some short rows. So I've already sort of built up this little bit of knitting here, and I've done some like a couple of short rows. You can see there's a little bit of a funky part right there, but that will come out when it's blocked. So I'm just going to show you the German short row first, and I have knitted to the last 3 stitches of my row. And I have my yarn just hanging in back because I have been knitting with it. So I'm just going to turn my work over, and I'm going to keep my yarn hanging down in front. Now I'm going to slip this first stitch. So now I am going to take this working yarn and pull all the way over the top of the needle. So I'm really yanking down on this. I want it to be really pulled tight because the tighter that you do, the tighter that you set up your short rows in the beginning, the better they'll look when you go back and resolve them. So you can see this on the other side here. That's the stitch. It's pulled all the way over the top. And now I'm going to bring the yarn in front. That's just between the needles. And I am going to purl over to the other side, and I will show you the German short row on the other side. So I'm going to do it this time from the knit side. Okay, so I've gotten to where I want to make my short row, and I'm just going to turn my work over. So now the first thing I want to do is I'm going to bring my yarn in front here. So the yarn always needs to be in front when you start your German short row. And I'm going to slip this first stitch. Now I'm going to take my working yarn, and again, I pulled it tight. I'm going to pull it all the way over the top. So you want to really give it a good yank because you want to make sure that these 2 legs of the stitch are elongated and they create what looks like a double stitch here. So you can see this on the back. So my yarn is going to stay in the back now, and I am going to show you my modified Sunday short row. So I, again, am holding this pretty tight just to begin with. Okay, and now I've kind of released it and it's my normal gauge. I'm just letting the yarn flow through my fingers. Okay, so I'm looking over here. This is my German short row stitch that I set up before. So I'm not quite getting there yet. I'm going to set up my Sunday short row. So I'm going to turn my work over. And now I'm going to use a pin. So this is something that I got from the Japanese short row. I'm going to put my pin around the yarn so it can slide up and down. So now if this were a Japanese short row, I would slip this first stitch. But because this is a Sunday short row, I am going to purl that first stitch. So your pin maybe will get a little bit stuck in your stitch. That's okay, just as long as you keep it nice and tight. You don't want a big loop hanging down there. So now I'm just going to purl my way on over to the other side. And I can see over on this side, that is where my German short row is, my little double stitch from the German short row. So I'm going to place another pin here because I want to do another Sunday short row. And your pins are always going to hang to the back just because of the way that the knit fabric is engineered. So I'm going to clip that around so this can just kind of move up and down. And then I am going to turn my work over. So I've got a little bit of yarn management issue here. So this is just on the back. It's going to slip up and down. I want to make sure that it's nice and tight here. So I'll just give it a little pull. You can see it just is going to hang on that wrong side. So I am going to knit on over here. And now we're going to start resolving the short rows. So this can be a problem sometimes. So the devil is in the details in this particular case. So see my gap here that you can see it pretty clearly. This is what I'm going to try to close up. I want to knit my loop here that my pin is holding together with the stitch over on the left side here, because that's going to close this big gap up. So the first thing I'm going to do is knit this last stitch. Okay. So now I'm going to take my pin and I'm going to just give it a yank and pull it so I can see that loop there. And the loop is going to go on my left needle. Now I'm going to take my pin out. I don't need that anymore. If you're feeling uncomfortable about doing this, you can actually leave your pin in there. And if you want to back out and try it again because it doesn't look proper or neat enough for you, then just go ahead and leave your pin in. And then later on, it'll make it much easier to back out. So now I've got my loop up here next to my actual real stitch, and you can tell the difference because this is the stitch right up at the top of this beautiful little column of stockinette stitches there. So now I am going to knit these two together. I want to hide the loop behind the stitch so that when I'm looking at the fabric, it just looks like a nice unbroken stockinette stitch fabric. So that one's done. And I'm going to knit one more, and then I come to my double stitch here for the German short row. So I'm going to just work this stitch like it's one stitch. I'm going to stick my needle through the center here. So I've gotten that whole thing. So there are two legs on either side, and then right up the top there you can see how they're twisted together. So my needle goes through both of those, and I'm going to knit a stitch into that. Now I'm just going to continue over to the end, and I will show you how to resolve your stitches on the purl side. So this can be a little bit trickier for the Sunday short row, same with the Japanese short row and the wrap and turn short row. So all of these, all those short row methods have in common that they are more difficult to resolve on the purl side and get a really pretty fabric in front. So again, we're here to the last stitch right before the gap here. and I'm going to close up this gap. So I need to work this stitch here on the left side of the gap together with the loop over here that I'm going to pull up on the right side of the gap. So I'm just going to purl one more stitch. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to purl these two stitches together. So there's the loop, and then here's this other stitch that this one needs to look like it's on top of the other one when I'm on the right side. So in order to keep this column of stockinette stitches beautiful and unbroken, I need to hide the loop in back of the stockinette stitch. So to do that, I need to put my needle into this stitch before I put it into the loop. And that means to keep from twisting the stitch here, I'm going to have to reorient the stitch. So right now I have the right leg in front and the left leg in the back. So what I'm going to do is reorient it so that the left leg is in front and the right leg is in back. And you do that by slipping knitwise and then putting it back. Now I'm going to bring my yarn forward. You don't want to catch it in between here. I'm going to pull this stitch up. It's actually the loop, sorry, misspoke there. And I'm going to take my pin out. Okay, so now I'm all set up. So remember I was talking about I need to put my needle through this stitch first and then through the loop. So I'm going to purl two together through the back loop. So in my needle goes to the stitch here and then into the loop. And then I am going to purl those two together. So you can see here, you can see at the base of the stitch here that it's open, it is not twisted. And now I'm gonna take those off the needle. And you can check yourself by looking at the front here and making sure that the bottom of the stitch in front is not twisted at the base. Now I'm going to go over to my German short row, and I still have my double loop here from my German short row, my double stitch. And I'm going to purl this like it is one stitch. So my needle is going right through the center here, and I'm going to purl that and then work to the end. Okay, so let me turn it around here, and you can see, you can check yourself and make sure that you have an unbroken line of stockinette stitches here. So there's a little bit of gauge funkiness there, but when you block this out, it will look beautiful and you will not be able to see the loop or the German short row on the front. Now on the back, it looks a little bit more messy. So because basically what we're doing is hiding everything we did on the back. But the front should look very pretty once this is blocked out. So I have a little bit of a funky thing happening there, but there you go. So I do hope, let's just get back to transition back to me. So I do hope that this has been helpful for you. I love doing German short rows. They're like my very favorite thing, but they don't always work out in your project. So I hope that you will consider the Sunday short row as a really great short row as well. And thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you around social media. Bye-bye.